Then a road trip, field trip down to Indianapolis, and they took quite a few people down to see what Kessler was already doing in Indianapolis with the rivers down there, the boulevards down there, and they came back filled with the spirit of possibility of doing that here in Fort Wayne. To step back just a little, that was 1909, to step back just a little, in 1905 the park board had been set up through state law, and you have two, those are the pictures of two members that I could find, Ferdinand and Joseph I couldn't find, but Tresselt to the left and David Foster on the right, and they were probably, well, fancy that. Hello, John Choate, how are you? They were two of the leaders of the community of their day, so they brought a lot of power to the park board at that time. The next step was the going back to the commercial club after Professor Zublin came to town and raised up a hue and cry among the citizens to move forward with city beautification. They brought this man, Charles Mulford Robinson, who was renowned throughout the country, to Fort Wayne to write a plan for the city of Fort Wayne. Here it is. He spent a fair amount of time in the city, wrote a plan which in many ways looks very much like Kessler's report of a couple of years later. He was a journalist. He was, if you read down there, first professor of civic design, wrote the first guide to city planning, and his civic art, or The City Made Beautiful, is considered the Bible of the City Beautiful movement. He's one of the great thinkers on this topic in the whole country, so he was brought to Fort Wayne to further move the project of the Boulevard, the Park and Boulevard System forward. So artistic city planning is to be understood as that which does not work according to systems, but according to the specific conditions of the case at hand. He quotes that in the front of his book. It's from German city planning. But he's already eyeing costs involved and making sure that those who control the purse strings in Fort Wayne will buy into this idea. So he writes, without unreasonable municipal expenditure, economic service, to increase the efficient labor and bring a higher class of labor to Fort Wayne. Economic development arguments. He proposes in this book essentially a Park and Boulevard system throughout the city, linking the parks that then existed, Sweeney, Lawton, and Lakeside. And again, he talks about the costs involved in the expenditures, that the improvements would pay for themselves over a short period of time. And he talks about how strangely small the expense this would be for the city of Fort Wayne. Then he adds a few other words, and I made that a shadow for the purpose of making a point. He was speaking to wait until he dies before making the gift available would be greatly to rob himself. He's talking to David Foster. He's encouraging him and the other leaders of the community at the time, the people who had a lot of money, to step right up and make your contribution to make this Park and Boulevard system work. Confidence and civic courage have frequently had the power to achieve that which doubt and hesitation would have rendered an impossibility, encouraging the troops. The next step was the formation of the Riverfront Commission, which included was a creature of city council, which included the mayor, J.J. Bauer, who is the Jakob Bauer, who's the second picture over there, and below is Frank Randall, the city engineer. So it was an all-star group of individuals who were going then to take the next step toward the Park and Boulevard system. or the beautification of Fort Wayne. The Board of Park Commissioners was allowed, this is the legislature of 1911, to proceed with the establishment of the park department, they were saying, could proceed with the establishment of needed boulevards, parks, and parkways. And they gave them the right to levy a tax to get it done. Principal thing that they did was they brought Kessler to town, and he is, at that time, along with probably a couple others in the United States, the leading city beautiful landscape architect. Kessler. And this is a little bit of his resume. Born in Germany near our sister city in Gera, raised in a variety of American cities, sent home by his mother to be educated. And his education was at some of the best schools in what was then Turingen, before it was unified. And he brought 19th century design training to American landscape architecture. His first job came at the recommendation of Frederick Law Olmsted. Remember what his major project was? Central Park in New York. Kessler's plan emphasized the potential for development along the riverbanks, network of boulevards, natural parkland, a unified system of both parks and boulevards, the importance of a balanced and systematic approach to public boulevards with scenic design character. Rudisill Boulevard was mentioned. Oh, that reminds me. On the table are maps of the Park and Boulevard System over here, and there are 10 copies for anyone that would like it. The boulevards that he proposed, Mr. Parker, would you hand out some of those maps so that everyone can follow along on this? Anthony Boulevard on the east, Pfeiffer Boulevard on the north, State Street, State Boulevard. Brookside Boulevard on the far west, and that is essentially Lindenwood. Kikianga on the west, which is now Rumsey Avenue, from Pfeiffer to Main Street. There was something to be Kessler Boulevard. Hannah Boulevard was to make Hannah not just a nice street, but a boulevard from Rudisill up to Weiser Park, and then link from Weiser Park over toward Reservoir Park. There was to be, and that was the unnamed boulevard between Reservoir and St. Mary's. Excuse me. There was to be an unnamed boulevard between Reservoir Park and the St. Mary's Parkway. St. Mary's Parkway, as you'll see on the map, was roadway on both sides of the St. Mary's, which would cut it through Foster Park, now about the jogging path, and on the west side, which is Bluffton Road. A boulevard along Tennessee Avenue, linking Anthony Boulevard to Lakeside Park, to Lawton Park. Converting Spring Street to a boulevard from Kikianga Boulevard to Brookside Boulevard. Convert Berry Street to a boulevard, enhancing it to a boulevard from St. Mary's Parkway to the Maumee Parkway. And then Rudisill Boulevard on the south side of Fort Wayne. And here's a map of how you have a map, so there's another map of it. City Council turned down the bond. $200,000 to do all of that. I went to the internet and calculated how much that would be in today's dollars, and someplace around $4,480,000 in today's dollars. Not much. A bond Kessler and Foster are not happy, obviously. Although there's something else to consider in this, that I believe that the superintendent of parks at the time was making $980.99. So I think compared to the average take-home salary at the time, it was probably a lot. But compared, if you bring forward with inflation, it's under $5 million. Kessler warned the city, if you buy it in pieces, it'll cost you a lot more. Now's the time to strike. Well, the rest of the boulevards languished, but Rudisill Boulevard was a go. In 1912, City Council transferred to the Park Department responsibility for the swath of land that would run from Foster Park to Foster Park to McMillen Park. It wasn't even McMillen Park at the time. And I believe, from what I've read, that they acquired the west end from actually from Pickway Avenue all the way to what became the park shortly thereafter, and then began piecemeal purchasing of the rest of the land heading east, where there was much more opposition to the use of the land to make a boulevard. Farmers didn't want to sell their property. The people didn't want to sell their property. So, and when they did have property, they didn't want to pay the additional assessment, essentially 2 months' income in some cases, to pay for the added construction and the widening and losing some of the land. I think everybody here knows Henry Rudisill. He was essentially the first German in town, and then started advertising for Germans on the East Coast and in Germany to come directly to Fort Wayne. He is a founder of St. Paul's Lutheran Church, a founding member of the Missouri Synod, which was constituted in Fort Wayne. He was the first treasurer of the city of Fort Wayne, built the first grist mill in Fort Wayne, had the first the lumber yard in Fort Wayne, sawmill, and a number of other things. And he was a county commissioner eventually. And that picture of that one house that was, he owned property down on what at the time was Richardsville Avenue, and later was renamed Rudisill Avenue. And then as the boulevard plan proceeded, they renamed it Rudisill Boulevard. The plan for the boulevard, 100-foot right-of-way, is very wide. And what's the average street in Fort Wayne these days? 50 or 60. So there's an extra 40 feet extending 20 feet on either side into my front yard and the front yard of many other people down there to make it a wider boulevard. Wider park strip between the sidewalks, and then area in what most people think are their front yards for tree plantings. Foster down there, he's noting in 1929, as he's reminiscing about the project, that it was a uninviting and unpromising section of Fort Wayne.